Do you know someone who's never listened to a podcast? It might sound bananas to you and me, but those people are out there. If we want the podcast industry to grow, we need to turn those non-podcast listeners into podcast listeners.
We think that if they just heard one podcast, one really, really good podcast that shows them how great podcast can be to listen to, that they might convert. Then they will listen to another, and then another, and then another.
Think Media thinks so too. And this April, they are launching Adopt a Listener. Yes, that's right, Adopt a Listener. We're asking you to find someone who says, podcasts aren't my thing, and give them a thoughtful recommendation. Something that will get them hooked. Go to tinkmedia.co/adopt to sign up, find resources, and learn how you can get involved.
Crosswires is a proud supporter of Adopt a Listener. See the other participating shows at tinkmedia.co/adopt.
Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to Crosswires. This week we are going back in time to the 90s. We're gonna do a bit more retro content because you know what? I grew up in the 90s. I was, by the time the 90s started, I was about 7 or 8, and I loved my 90s tech. I loved my 90s computers, and we don't do enough retro content on this show, so we're back now. My guest this week is someone many of you may already know, and we've both just had a little bit of a, shall we say, an unpleasant surprise in the change to our favourite Discord. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Naoki's Retro Corner, Naoki Saito. Naoki, see, I got it wrong straight away. There we go.
Yeah, don't worry. If anyone got it right first time, I'd be very concerned.
Because it's a running joke that Neil at RMC Retro, or should I say, the Atari fan club.
Yes, you should say that, really, but you're not too happy with that.
I'm not. I look, as an indoctrinated Amiga fan, seeing that Atari logo in my Discord just sends shivers down my spine.
Well, I can't exactly say much. I've got a smashed up Atari still, and I've got a painted Amiga, so I'm hated in both camps.
To be fair, at least you did not try and take a table saw to an Amiga.
That is true. That is a clip I've saved for.
I could not pull these up on that. Naoki joins me very kindly. We've been talking sort of on and off for probably about. Well, maybe nearly a year now since not quite that, but I've been in the RMC Discord for a while, and we were talking. I said, "Hey, come on the show." And I think he said, "Well, let's see how it goes." I thought, hang on, I'm going to phrase this in the right way, not to embarrass myself or you. I think we just thought, well, let's make sure we've got a good topic, and of course, Naoki wanted to make sure I was sound, which is still my favourite thing that's ever happened to a podcast recording. Alex from Arcade Archive. Apparently, I reached out to him to say, hey, do you want to come on the show? He reached out to Neil to say, is this James guy actually all right? Like, shall I record with him? And apparently Neil said, yeah, he's sound.
Well, that's always a good thing to hear from Neil. If Neil says that you're sound, then you must be good.
I do take that as praise. Anyway, Naoki, before we get into our topic today and look at some of that amazing 90s, and look, we're going to be talking the 90s era of arcade and maybe some cool stuff that's going on right now that you're doing and DIY builds, as well as, I'm not going to lie, I'm looking forward to this, talking a little bit about the 16-bit and maybe, we'll see if it, I don't know, does 32-bit count for the for Saturn?
Oh, definitely.
It does.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit of Sega as well. And if my uncle Neil, if you're listening to this episode, this one goes out to you because you had both of these systems. And I remember you letting me actually use these when I was younger. So thank you. Anyway, before we get into that, Naoki, do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself? Get those content plugs in there straight away.
Well, you already said I predominantly do YouTube videos, and under Naoki's Retro Corner, they tended to be about like retro consoles, retro computers. Started to do a bit more arcade stuff, which is kind of what I was originally known for doing, just getting a random arcade board and playing around with it. I think it was around about the time that I met Neil, because we did the BBC Model B painting together. That's going way back. And that was how I got introduced to Neil, because he'd actually mentioned to me, oh, sorry, he mentioned if anyone has a way of painting this case. And I said, well, I work in the body shop trade at the time, and I know exactly what to do. I also know that you can't just paint it, because if you try to paint it, it'll just come off with the oils on your hand. So I met up with Neil. We recorded the BBC session together. I nearly fumigated him twice. I had an extractor fan. It didn't quite work, but it was fun. And then he said to me, "Oh, I've got a Discord server. Do you want to join?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And pretty much since then, got more involved with the community. And then after COVID hit, I think everyone got stuck at home, got bored, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to make the most of it. I got a new toy to play around with. I got my MacBook Pro. I had iMovie on there, had a few other things. I'm like, you know what? Let's go for it. Let's try this and see how it gets on. So yeah, pretty much since that point, I have been trying to do videos on a semi-regular basis, and failing to do that every single year, but enjoying it along the way. And yeah.
Awesome. Now, as a complete aside, and I haven't put in my show notes, the episode that went out the week before we recorded this was with Jack, aka It's an Arse, and his mate Sam, and on that wonderful video they did where he'd gone back and edited in old versions of Final Cut.
Yeah.
And a question I put to them at the time, and I don't think they necessarily were able to, they answered, but I thought maybe, given that you said MacBook Pro and iMovie, do you think iMovie rightly deserves almost a place in the almost credit for so many content creators getting their start?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, it doesn't matter what video editor that you use. I mean, I used to use Windows Movie Maker back in the day, like Windows Movie Maker 7. It's not great, but it's there. But I've spoken to quite a few people, and they use like a load of things. Obviously, you get a ton of people now using Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. But there are some people out there who use Final Cut Pro. Some people be obviously using Premiere, and then you get people like Techmoan. Did you know that Techmoan uses iMovie for all of his video editing still?
I did. Seriously?
No, seriously, he does. He still uses iMovie to do it. And the funny thing is, when you know that and you start looking at his videos more critically or analytically, you can start to see that it is actually iMovie, because there's only so many things you can do with an iMovie. It's like the title banners, for example, or some of the effects. You notice that, and it's like, oh yeah, he's still doing it.
Wow, and Techmoan's channel. I believe his real name is Matt. There's some of his videos just give me so much joy. Yeah, his most recent one was the awful post office announcement system thing that he did a whole thing on.
I kind of like that system. Like, I was looking at it and thinking, I actually put in the comments, like, for what it's supposed to do and how it's been designed, it's the perfect application of the technology at the time.
Fair play. Yeah, fair play. Actually, yeah, that rear projection enclosed unit, not having to worry about some random post office clerk rewinding the tape or putting the wrong tape in. Instead of a post office promo reel, you get, well, don't know, Strictly Come Dancing. Well, it wasn't Strictly Come. It would have been Come Dancing back then. But yeah, it was good. Anyway, we're not here to talk Techmoan, though. Matt, if you are listening, I would love to have you on my show to talk old audio formats. Just if you're listening, open invitation. Anyway, let's start with arcade, because I have fond memories of arcade machines. But because you love the arcade stuff. I know one of the things we're talking about is like these DIY mini arcade builds. But what is it about arcade that inspires you, that makes you want to work on projects around the arcade era and around those systems?
I think it's just because it's more, when you have a retro console or a retro computer, there's obviously, you're not just playing the games, you're experiencing the entire system. You're playing around with the actual hardware. You're getting the sounds of, like, maybe you've got an IBM PC and you've got a Winchester drive in there. You've got all of that going on, and sometimes even just smells. You've got a whole experience going on. And there's something more rewarding to doing that than there is to just play a game on an emulator, for example. And kind of like what happens with the actual physical size, when you go and go to the arcade, everything is bigger. You get more of an experience. It's louder. Some cabs move, so you have the actual physical experience of being thrown around, which again, Alex from Arcade Archive can attest to with the R360. He said he nearly vomited on that. But it's just, when you have such a massive thing, I mean, because arcade machines are not small. Even if you get just a candy cab, they're not small things. They take up a good amount of space. It's all of that experience that you get with these machines and just playing around with them, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe something that it is that, and it's that experience of the noises, because when you're in an actual arcade, and I have to admit, due to, that situation somewhat resolved itself. I was going to say due to budget. Folks, I now have a job. I'm working again. Yay. But I haven't yet been able to get down to the cave and to Arcade Archive to experience that. But my recollection, I think of like going to, say, even, in the more, the late early 2000s, going into like an arcade at, say, Hollywood Bowl. The noise, because you're not just getting the machine you're playing. You're getting everything around you. You're getting the soundscape, and it is something. And again, those, as you said, those huge screens, and these are proper. Certainly the age that we're talking, these are CRTs. These are proper displays. None of this LCD rubbish that you talk about now, lad.
Yeah.
I don't know why I've just put on a Yorkshire accent. Honestly, sorry, but yeah, you've hit something there. They are not small units, and unless you're someone who has the bottom of a mill to fill up with arcade cabinets, you're probably not going to have the space to really enjoy an arcade-like experience at home. Would you say that's fair for most people?
It depends on the cabinet. I've known a few people who have arcade machines in their house, but these are the people that... Sorry, there's an ice cream truck going by. It's distracting me.
Sorry. I'll have a 99 flake, please.
I think it's gone now. I've known people with arcade machines in the house. Jack as well, he has one. He's got a...
Oh, okay.
I think he's got a... he's going to rip into me if I get it wrong. I think he's got a Blast City. Or it's an Astro. It's one of those two, and I know he's going to comment on this. There's a message coming, right? I mean, it's happening. I have the vision of it in my head when I went and saw him, but I can't remember exactly the specifics now. But candy cabs are something like, they're big, but there's something that you can justify having into the thing, especially in a game room. But it's some of the larger stuff, like obviously you've got the standard uprights, and then you've got like sit down drivers, and then you've got the Dulux cabinets, and then the Super Dulux cabinets. And when you start getting to that, that's the point where you either need a dedicated room or garage or something, and you have to be a proper collector, or someone who really enjoys them to have them, like to have these bigger or more exotic cabinets in a home.
That then brings me on to kind of the concept of mini arcades. Like, what's the idea here? Because and just to be clear, we're not talking about or are we? Maybe I'm getting this wrong. We're not maybe talking about the stuff that you can go to game and buy. Like, is it the 1-up?
Yeah,
the little 1-up units. We're not talking about these, are we? I mean,
you can include them if you want. I mean, I think anyone who talks about the 1-up cabs, there's two sides of the same coins. You can rip into them as being a commercialized venture of effectively a MAME cabinet, which is its own genre, which can get hilarious at times. At the same time, it's going back to that, you're also still playing games and you're still living through them. So I think, as funny as they can be, I don't think they're a bad idea. So I'd include them as, you can have them in your house. Yeah.
Okay. I guess it's all down to the investment that people want to make, because look, they are as you said, a commercialized MAME, and we're going to talk a little bit about MAME, and because I've got one big question for you as we get towards the emulation side of things. But what are you particularly talking about when we talk about a mini arcade? What is it that you're working on?
Well, as I have just released a video on, I am starting to build a quarter scale Dance Dance Revolution cabinet, and some people in the UK might know this as Dancing Stage, because that's what it was originally called in Europe and the UK. We had Dancing Stage Euromix, and then Euromix 2, which I'm sure that everyone's heard of Euromix 2. Around about DDRX is when they changed it so that worldwide it was known as Dance Dance Revolution.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I am building a quarter scale sized arcade cabinet, well, quarter scale sized DDR cabinet that is going to be fully playable and entirely self-contained. So everything from the audio system to the computer to I/O boards, everything to make it work, including the lights. I want it to work on this little quarter scale cab. It's one of those things, I made it quarter scale because I wanted it to all work. And if I didn't want it to all work, then I could have made it a lot smaller, but there's just too much going on otherwise.
Because there's only so much size reduction you can make in a DDR, so a dance simulator machine before you're only allowing toddlers to play it, right? I mean, you want people to be able to actually.
Well, you can, like, this is a thing. Even quarter scale, you can't, like, a toddler can't even play it in terms of like using their feet anymore.
Okay, so we are at that scale. Okay, right.
Well, because I think you'd have to do it at least half scale before that gets to, toddler scale. But then technically DDR kids already exist. It's incredibly rare, but it does exist. So you could argue why not just do that instead. But yeah, no, quarter scale is about the smallest you could realistically make it and have it all self-contained. And I think that's the biggest thing is this, the whole self-contained aspect of it. Because it's not like you can't plug in a USB dance mat and then have it like a projector connected to it and actually use it as a gaming console, but as an object into itself.
That makes sense. And so this will be playable with it's going to be you're going to be using what, fingers to control the.
Yeah. So imagine, if you will, like you've got, I can't remember the exact. I know I should know the measurement, but I can't. But it's basically if you had A4 size but square, like, pad in front of you, and you could use like the tips of your fingers, and you're basically slapping the pad kind of thing. You're not slapping it, but you're tapping it down with your fingers kind of thing.
Okay, so we're talking what, maybe, hang on, let's see if I can put maybe maybe bigger than a Stream Deck?
Width wise of a Stream Deck, maybe square, maybe give or take a few centimeters. I think if I recall right, each of the arrow pads is a 7.5 centimeter square pad. Ample space to touch it with.
Nice. And I guess that leads. So this sounds incredible. Like, I love the idea of this because, it's something you'll be able to have, and show off. Now, I guess the question's going to be hardware wise. Like, I put in my show notes, what do people need? But I guess a better question is going to be, what components have you had to put together to make this? Because what is this based off? Is this based off a Raspberry Pi, or are you doing something different?
That's the interesting part, because I could have potentially done Raspberry Pi ... So I'm actually using an Intel NUC, NUC. So for those who don't know, it's just basically laptop components, but it's about a 4-inch by 4-inch cube, something like that. And the reason I decided to go that way is because one of the other ways of doing it, which is Outfox, which I'll talk about in a minute, that wouldn't have allowed me to actually play the original games. And that was important to me because, again, something I want to go on to in a minute is I wanted to play the original games I used to play on this cab I was building. And the only way to really do that was by using MAME. And whilst MAME itself can run on a Raspberry Pi, I haven't tried it. Maybe the Raspberry Pi 4 is powerful enough, but you tried to get a Raspberry Pi 4 at this climate at the minute. Oh
gosh, no.
So I ended up going with a Intel NUC because that would allow me to do the best of both worlds, pretty much.
They are a wonder. I mean, look, those NUCs, they get overlooked, but I've got to say that class of device is actually. I want to be careful how I say this, but I think if you need a family, I'm just completely off topic. If you want like a family computer or maybe a family like entertainment system that's maybe not just your bog standard streaming box, these are wonderful little units. I mean, very, very obviously nowhere near as powerful as, say, something like an M2 Mac Mini, but I think they're a wonderful concept. You've got other companies doing similar ones, but the Intel NUCs really interest me as a concept because there's so many variations. I think, am I right? You can get ones now that have got integrated AMG APUs and GPU. Well, they won't be NUCs, will they? No, they do. No, they do have AMD graphics. Intel worked with AMD on one which is an Intel CPU, but an AMD GPU.
Oh, is that the gaming one that they did where it has an actual double wide PCIe slot? Or something like that.
That's it. Yeah, so you can get those, but hey, so you're using a NUC. What then? Because you said you wanted to talk about a few bits of the actual, like how it all works. That NUC provides you with a processor, provides you with RAM, storage, and then your I/O. But I'm guessing most of this doesn't run just off like a little Windows app or a bunch of USB. What are you actually doing?
Well, technically, it does run. It would run on USB. The difference is so obviously the NUC itself doesn't have GPIO, so you can't use it like a Pi in that aspect. But that's fine, really, because that kind of forces me into making my own input and output board, which connects via USB. So I can make my own little I/O board that connects via USB and emulates basically a joystick. So all of the buttons on the cabinet will be joystick buttons. And then the interesting thing is actually using the USB to actually send out the light data to the I/O board, so that so MAME can actually use the real lights on the cabinet, and so when the emulated game turns on, I don't know, the header lights, for example, then the real cab will do that exactly.
That's interesting because look, USB for those of you who don't know, stands for Universal Serial Bus, which means it's perfect for doing this sort of for sending commands to and from devices. I mean, look, you know far more about this than I do, but I'm going to assume that that's pretty much how we're getting to that point. Like even the play date, which I was showing Naoki before the episode, I found out the way that does its mirroring to the Windows or Mac app is through serial commands, through USB, which is why it's a nightmare to install on the Steam Deck because I can't recompile the serial. Oh, it's a nightmare. Anyway, that aside, so software-wise, what are you doing in terms of effectively getting all those bits? So you've got all your components now. At this point, probably should ask you, are you using genuine Samurai arcade parts from mods2joysticks.com?
I am using genuine Naoki-made parts because there is... When you do things in scale, you can't go to Sanwa and say, oh, I like this button. Can I have it in quarter scale, please?
True.
There's a whole episode on how you can miniaturize all your buttons and stuff like that, and just the complexities of... Because if it was just miniaturizing the button, for example, you can't... if it was just miniaturizing the button, it'd be fine, because you can just attach a PC button or something, a glorified case switch. But when I put the requirements of it has to be as accurate and faithful to the real cab as possible, and now those buttons have to light up, that makes it very difficult to achieve. So, unfortunately, I can't use genuine Samurai arcade parts. I would love to, but it's just not possible in this instance.
Okay, and so you're having to now, I'm going to make assumptions here, and again, this is what I love so far about this chat so far is Naoki's correcting me when I'm getting stuff wrong, because look, this is a discussion. I'm learning so much here, and that's what I hope you're all getting out of this episode as well. But is there 3D printing involved? Do you what's the technique for creating, because like, you want them to light up, so you're obviously going to have to put LEDs in there or some form of light. Yeah.
So, well, it's going to be LED, and it's also going to be incandescent bulbs. There's no need to do incandescent in some places, but...
Authenticity, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So if a button just lights up and it's not too difficult to put an incandescent in there, then I'll just use an LED. So the start buttons, the selection buttons, the pad lights, the up, down, left, right arrows, so they'll all be LED. But the ones that are in the header, the spotlights, I'm going to use incandescents in those because whilst I could use LEDs, it just doesn't feel right to have the spotlights just come on and off like instantly. They need that gradual fade and fade out for it to feel correct. But when it comes to the subwoofer rings, and I will happily say, I don't actually know what I'm going to be doing there. I tried to use LEDs because I could get away with it. But in the various techniques I've tried so far, which includes basically using acrylic rods, but that are textured so that the light spreads out. I've tried to use side-emitting LED strands, which are what they use in light bulbs. I've tried to use, I can't remember, there was another technique I tried, but none of those looked right. They felt wrong. So I'm still not sure what I'm going to do, but it might even end up as being as crazy as I might get some custom CCFL cold cathode fluorescent lights.
That's it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And actually have some small 3mm ones custom made for this cab because that's the only way it would look accurate.
And it's really interesting because we, now, look, in this studio space here, literally everything is some form of LED. My key lights are LED. The light strip behind us is LED. I've just knocked my coffee grinder. The Hugo thing down there is LED. This bulb is LED. Everything here is LED. And people think, LED is the only way that you should be doing any form of lighting. No, because things like CCFLs and, incandescents still serve a purpose in different applications.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want incandescents. I would say you probably don't want incandescents in your home because, hey, this whole thing called the energy cost crisis. But for projects where they're not going to be on all the time, I don't think it's inappropriate at all to use, should we say, I think what's maybe the best term, project accurate or period accurate technology, right?
Yeah, it's not even so much as necessarily being accurate in terms of, like I said, to the cab. Because, like I said, my first attempt was to use LEDs for these subwoofer rings. And like I said, the reason I didn't do it is because when I tested it on a small scale, I say small scale for a small scale cab, when I tested it using basically a U-loop and two LEDs, it looked fine. It looked perfect. But when I scaled it to a full-size ring, it around the middle, rather at the top of the ring, it faded off, and you could just see it was getting dimmer, and it just did not look right in the end. So
it wasn't giving that consistency, that brightness that you'd expect from. And what we're talking about here is the subwoofer rings, like the illumination around that. When you look at a DDR cab, that almost like I see almost like party speaker-esque look that everyone seems to be so keen on these days.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of the more iconic things about DDR. If at least because the cab I'm building, at least in the Bemani world, as it was called, is a standard definition cab. They have obviously made newer versions over the years, but this standard definition is one of the most iconic things about it. Was these either red or pink neon rings that go around the subwoofers, the two 10-inch subwoofers on the cab, and so you want to get it right. Otherwise, it will feel wrong. And I'm sure many people say, "I'll just use the LEDs," and it doesn't have to be perfect, and they're probably right. But at the same time, if we can get it to look right, why shouldn't we?
Absolutely. Look, if you're putting all this, it's something I think people will know by now, and I hope it comes across, is that if I'm doing something, I want it to look, and I want it to be something I want to be proud of, right? Because this is something you're putting hours and hours into, so many hours of labor and research. You want it to be good. And I know, look, some of you will know that when we live stream, we've gone quite overboard with some of our overlays. I cannot tell you the number of hours that I've sat in front of Affinity Designer trying to start off an overlay design and no, that doesn't work. That looks awful. And I scrap it and start over because I'm not happy with that quality. But when you're passionate at something, and when it's, maybe it's a personal hobby, well, no, a personal project that you're really passionate about, you do put that effort into, and I think it comes down to, for me, it comes down to that personal touch, doesn't it? Rather than mass produced, it will do for shipping to game, for example, to sell on mass. Like, no, this is something I want to show off, and I think is that a fair sort of?
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain amount of personal pride that's going into it. I am capable of doing this kind of thing, but it's one of the things of, I've always felt like, if someone looks at something and goes, "Oh wow, this is amazing. This bit's a little bit whatever," but everything else is fine. As soon as you have that one detraction, it's this sort of a doorway to start seeing other flaws. As much as I am a perfectionist, and I'm trying to avoid letting that get in the way of things, that whole subwoofer ring thing that's a big issue to me. If you can't get that right, that's gonna, even a small amount, it's gonna detract from it, and that's why I put so much time into getting it to work right.
That makes perfect sense. And so, I guess moving on to the software side, you mentioned MAME. So, is this at its core? Is this still emulation? You're not actually putting like original boards in here, then?
Well, first of all, the original board, it
wouldn't
actually
fit, would it?
I was about to say it doesn't fit into the cab, and it doesn't. But the cab itself is actually almost. It's actually slightly larger than the original PCB. That runs DDR. It's exactly the same width. It's just slightly longer. But yeah, so it will be entirely emulated asterisks. So part of it, because like the whole tradition of using a DDR cab is not just playing the original dancing stage or DDR, it's also using a project called Stepmania. This will do both. So it will emulate all the originals, but it will also play Stepmania, so it's native. But it's not like it won't be able to play an original board. I am going to design the I/O board in such a way that it will allow an input from a real System 573 and let you play the real game on the real cab. Well, a real cab.
On actual hardware, even be it quarter scale. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rather than just having a simple dance pad or keyboard controller on a PCB off to the side of you. I mean, you'll still have the PCB off to the side of you, but then you have a actual cabinet, so you get that experience.
And I guess a genuine question here. So I remember obviously when we got into like maybe even my memory is like PlayStation 2 with the dance pads.
Yeah.
How does this compare? Because you mentioned early on, you could just buy a USB dance mat and be done with it, and just what do you think is it because of the that tactile experience, that light up, that actual like almost replica of what you'd actually be using on a full scale cab? It's more of a replication of that feel, the lights and everything like that.
Yeah, it is that. I mean, it is. It's also it's kind of a celebration. It's a celebration of DDR, and coincidentally, this year is actually the 25th anniversary of the original DDR release. So that's kind of my motivator for doing this at this point. But yeah, there's loads of different players of DDR. There's you've got your families, your kids who do it leisurely, for a bit of fun. Then there was me, who used to, every time I saw an arcade and I saw one with that in that, I was always playing it. But there is a whole community, the Bemani community, Bemani being the series of games by Konami, which include Dancing Stage, but there's others like Beatmania and Guitar Freaks and Drum Mania. There's quite a few. But, they have it has a real dedicated following. And these are the people who buy their own DDR cabs, have them in their houses or in their, garages or whatever. And they will play that religiously, or at least they'll play it, get really, really good scores out of it. It's like when you watch people playing like Guitar Hero on the hardest difficulty, and you just see all those fret notes going by, and you're just wondering, how can the body physically move fast enough to do this kind of thing? So I mean, and to, a lot of people, there's various different ways of playing it. Some people, they'll happily use what they call a soft pad, which is the ones that me and you are probably more familiar with for the consoles. Then you get hard pads, which are made out of metal. People use keyboards, mechanical keyboards. They might even have an actual dedicated button input, which is effectively a 4-key keyboard that they plug in.
Oh, okay.
There's even for the PlayStation, there's an actual Konami actually released it was a dance pad. Basically, it had both dance pads inside of on a PlayStation-like controller that plugged into the PS1. And I don't know how you feel about it, but there is an excellent video by a friend of mine called Clue that goes just into all the different input devices that people use for things like DDR. Incredibly good video, that is.
Oh, but absolutely put that in my little handy link section in our. So we're using. I think maybe no. We literally Naoki's one of the first guests to we're fully utilizing our new Nextcloud instance to do live collab on our show notes as we're going. I love this thing. It's fantastic. Like a little shout out to the folks at Nextcloud for all they've done. So we'll put absolutely any videos now. I remember, and it's really interesting. Before we get into, because obviously we've got something else to talk about as well, but I want to talk just quickly, now when we look at dance games now, so for example, Just Dance on the Switch, for example, is all done using the Joy-Cons. There's no actual pad there anymore. And
yeah, and I mean, I think you've had Just Dance on was it the 360 or the Xbox One that had the Xbox Kinect as well?
Oh, yeah.
Even Konami are doing this. There's a cabinet I believe it's called Dance Around. And you imagine 50-inch screens stacked. So from the floor upwards.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, 50-inch screens stacked upwards. And then they've got a Kinect sensor. I can't remember exactly where it is on the thing. And yeah, it's basically Just Dance kind of thing, but in the actual arcade. So, I think we've basically come full circle now. We've started on the consoles. Now we're going back to the arcades. There's so many different versions of these dancing cabs, and there's obviously clones of dance DDR. There's there is Stepmania, but there's also I've forgotten the name. I should find that out very quickly because I will get lambasted if I do not mention it. It was
go on.
Stepmaniacs, I think it was. Yeah, Stepmaniacs is one.
Stepmaniacs. I mean, because even in pop culture, my instant memory when we talk about people playing these games religiously, there's Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where they have a scene where him and Knives are doing their dance off, and then there is a whole episode of 2 episodes of King of the Hill where the Hills go to Japan and Bobby gets addicted to dance to what I guess must have been Dance Dance Revolution, but on a big scale in a square. And he meets this Japanese girl, and they dance together. And it's all quite sweet in a way. But yes, Anyway, is it fair to say that I think you said earlier, fans of these type of games are very passionate people. Hence why we wanted to double check to make sure we have the right name of the project. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, to me, it's like how I see it is it's how I feel about some of the old original Sonic the Hedgehog games on the Mega Drive. Admittedly, they're not. Well, I say stuck in the past, but they are of an older time period. They don't have nearly as much of the features like modern Sonics do, for better or worse. But that's what you enjoy, kind of thing. That's just something that you associate with the most. So yeah, they can. I think there's an incredible amount of passion towards it, especially other rhythm games as well.
So many good games. Now, you mentioned before we start recording, or rather, I think, do you know what? I've lost the track of what we said. We talked about a little project. Is this Project Outfox you wanted to talk about?
It was a brief mention. So obviously, I said that what reasons I couldn't use a Pi was essentially the scope of the project wouldn't allow for it. If it weren't for needing to, or wanting to use the original games, or even just using Stepmania but with a skin to emulate the sort of the look and feel of the originals. I could have used a Pi, and I could have used a thing called Outfox, Project Outfox, which is it's basically Stepmania but optimized for the Pi and designed to run actual full-scale cabinets. So you just plug in this Raspberry Pi into your cabinet, and everything should work in the way that you'd expect it to. And it's a great project, and if I think anyone who's interested in this kind of stuff, I would greatly appreciate if they check that out, because there's a great bunch of people who make that project, and for basically in this spare time kind of thing.
Because you can get jammer adapters for the Pi, and I think you've put a link in here to one as well for the Mister. You can get, is it the Mistercade?
Yeah. So again, I think if people saw the Mister being used as a console replacement, and a very good one, and if you can afford the cost of the Mister, which is that's a big cost to get into it, but when you can, it's a really rewarding experience. And the fact that people are making arcade calls for the Mister is great, but it kind of doesn't work just on TV or something like that.
No.
So when you've got the Mistercade, for example, and you can plug in the Mister into your Candy Cab if you have that, and then just be able to play all these classic games, but in the way that it's next to the real thing, And that's the thing I think is worth mentioning, is part of the reason people want the Mister is you can't have everything. Sometimes you just physically do not have the space to have every single console, every single computer. And it's the same thing but worse with arcade boards, not just because of the physical space. Some of these boards are taking A3 sheets of paper size, and that's just that might be a slightly larger estimate, but that is still that they roughly are about that size. But they're very expensive. You can't buy one, even a cheap footy game, for example, you can't buy one for less than 100 now, which is kind of silly. The prices have skyrocketed. And so the cost behind it, the physical storage space, and even the fact that they just aren't reliable. You buy an expensive board, you might get it, and then 3 weeks later, one of the custom chips dies on it. And when a custom chip dies, there's not much you can do. So Mistercade being there to alleviate all of that kind of thing and give you as close to, or as it's as real as you can get kind of thing.
It makes me ask a question, which is, if we put on sort of a scale of on one side of the best experience that you could have in terms of realism, real hardware, real cabinets with the real boards on the best, that's the dream. If there were no reliability issues and you could just do it and it was affordable, that's what everyone would want. On the other side, maybe you've got MAME on a Pi or on something else, because obviously emulation always has a cost, and Pies are not easy to get hold of. I've tried playing arcade games. It's not the same experience on a Pi. I do have MAME emulation on the Steam Deck. But again, I'm not using actual arcade controllers. I'm using keyboard, mouse, or my PS5 controller or other controllers. But in the middle, is it fair to say the Mister project sits somewhere in the middle? Because the Mister isn't emulation; it's FPGA, field programmable gateways, and we are hoping to get Neil and Richard from the Mister Multisystem team, because that's a whole different. That's a whole another level of Mister. Is obviously you probably. I guess you could still plug a jammer adapter into a MMS.
There has been many a talk about that, because it should be possible to do that. But I seem to remember them saying something they acknowledged that there was a want for it for the MMS, but I don't know much more than that. I think that was as far as that conversation went. But
the MMS is really more designed as a consoleized Mister for maybe home retros and home consoles. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I think obviously, is it Heber? I'm so
Heber.
sorry.
Yeah, Heber.
Rich.
No, yeah, Richard.
But
Richard will come for you. But yeah, Heber.
Yeah, but I always get confused. But they have done them and Neil have done a really fantastic job with the MMS. It's one of those things. If I could afford it, which I can't, I would have definitely bought one because it's a great system. I was always in the opinion for ages, like you like, oh, emulation's fine. You can't really notice a difference. But I think if you get a game, there are just very subtle things, and you'll experience them, and then just think that's not quite right. And obviously with the MMS, for the most part, when the core has been fully done, that you don't get that. And so, like I say, I think I would put the MMS and the Mysticade, depending on which core you pick. And obviously, this isn't a criticism of the MMS or Mysticade. This is all. It's whatever core you pick, and you can get different results. Your mileage may vary, but I would put that more towards the having a real cab, having the hardware kind of side of it, in my opinion. Partly because of the cost, though. That's the other thing. Like, I mean, the Mister. Let's say you get the Mysticade. You're effectively paying a premium, and that premium is basically the cost of a real arcade board. So if you only have the one game that you're interested in, as long as it's something that's not a cave shooter, which can go for thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds, which is ridiculous. Sometimes if you're just going for one game, you might as well just get that one game. But then if you want it to be reliable, then maybe you get a Mister. Or maybe, if you want to do more than one game, a Mister would be excellent for that. Again, there are a load of people that don't like MAME cabs, for example, but I have nothing wrong with MAME cabs. I think if you want to play games, by all means, enjoy it. It's all for fun, really. So why not?
Absolutely. Awesome. And look, I love arcade games. And look, again, if I have the space, I would absolutely consider something like a MAME cab. I've seen a MAME cab in our local comic store, and it's kind of cool. But let's move on to, now this is a really interesting one, because as many of you know, my parents believe we should have a computer, not consoles. So we had, my first machine, as many of you know, was the Amiga 600, and then we moved on to PC. But I did have a Sega Game Gear, so I've got a bit of a fondness for Sega, and I think you do too. Like about 16-bit / early 32-bit. Let's talk first, I guess, the Mega Drive, or for our American friends, the Genesis, because I don't understand that. I do not understand why they called it the Genesis in the States.
I mean, I've known a few name changes because of regional things. Like every region of the Dreamcast, for example, it has its own logo, like different color.
Oh, yeah, so, of course, yeah.
Like, because it's like, what is it? It's like in Europe it's blue, in Japan it's orange. No, in Japan it's red, and then in America it's orange. So I've known regional changes, but Genesis, I don't get that one. I think what they was is when they were doing marketing, Mega Drive didn't sound interesting, and like Genesis was slightly cooler, slightly edgier, so they went with that one.
Because Master System, it was a Master System in all territories, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Well, actually, technically, yes and no. Japan originally got the Master System as the Sega SG-1000 Mark III, and then it became the Master System. Although the SG Mark III and Master System, at least in Japan, are effectively the same thing, but one's more computery like, and I say that in a very loose fashion because it doesn't have a keyboard, even though you can get one. Whereas the Master System is obviously what we're more familiar with. And they got the FM chip that the rest of the world didn't. So the Master System had both programmable square wave sound generation and an FM chip in their Master System. And, it sounds great, especially if you listen to Space Harrier.
Oh, yes.
It sounds fantastic on that. But, yeah, we didn't get that. We just got PSG in our territories.
I did not know that. I did not know that was missing from a Master System, because I remember a friend of mine had the Master System, the original Master System, and then I know someone else, many other people who had the Master System 2, which was definitely a different beast. But let's talk Mega Drive, because for me, that Mark 1 Mega Drive is iconic. I remember, as I said, my uncle having that Mark 1 Mega Drive. What made that Mega Drive so special at the time? Because, now, correct me if I'm wrong, this came out well before the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, it did. And it's both a blessing and a curse for Sega because, on the one hand, they did get the market edge, but Nintendo had the time to optimize their hardware and get out something that admittedly was better than the Mega Drive.
Did that pain you there, Naoki, to say that? That was very pained, wasn't it?
I don't know is the answer because I grew up with a Mega Drive. I like the Mega Drive, but I do respect that the Super Nintendo, the SNES, whatever you want to call it, it is technically better. Asterisks. Like CPU on the Mega Drive is better, but the sound hardware on the SNES is arguably superior. But it's just preference, realistically. But yeah, so the Mega Drive came out first, and it was based on the some of their arcade boards. I think allegedly it was based on the Sega System 16 arcade board, and that was used in quite a few different games, like Sega eSWAT, I think, in the arcades, among others. So, and Sega had a good foothold in the arcade at the time. And so bringing that kind of scale of quality with the FM chip that was included, the the VDP, that they used, they got this system that was pretty good, like really good compared to, at the time, the entirety of the competition. I think even the TurboGrafx 16 or the PC Engine, whatever you want to call it, that system looks good, but the Mega Drive is obviously technically it's technically superior, and it is just has a lot more going for it, I think.
Yeah, and what was the slogan? Sega does what Nintendo don't. Is that the...
Yes.
That was the marketing thing, wasn't it? And I just have fond memories. I mean, obviously Sonic, because now Sonic was a Mega Drive first launch, wasn't it? And then it came to Master System and Game Gear later on.
Yeah, so it was launched on the Mega Drive, and apparently there was a big argument with Sega of Japan. Was it? No, it was Sega of America versus Sega of Japan, I think. Don't quote me on the story, but basically one of the higher-ups argued you need to put Sonic in the pack-in game for the Mega Drive, and I think Sega of Japan were like, no, we're making so much money from Sonic 1, the game itself, to put it into the console would just completely erode those sales. But obviously, if you were buying the console and you got the game with it, then you get a lot more people buying the console. So that was one of the things that made Sega a lot of money in the end run. Because, I mean, before that, they were using Alex Kidd as their mascot. Does anyone remember Alex Kidd?
I mean, I know of him, but for me, the mascot of Sega was always Sonic. But obviously, I'm wrong. But yeah. Well,
it was Alex Kidd. I think it might have been something different before then. I think during the Master System phase, that's when that's when they were using Alex Kidd. But I mean, let's be honest, no one really knows or cares. It's the cobalt blue hedgehog that everyone knows about. I mean, that's why he's blue.
Really? Oh, what?
Yeah.
What? As it what?
Sega's logo is cobalt blue. So when they were designing Sonic, they made him cobalt blue to be their mascot.
Oh, that makes sense, because obviously hedgehogs are. But just in case anyone was under illusion, hedgehogs are not normally blue. To be fair,
unless you paint them, but don't do that.
No, I was going to say, please don't paint your hedgehogs. Please don't feed. Just get this out of the way, folks. Please don't paint your hedgehogs blue. Please don't feed your hedgehogs chili dogs.
Please don't give them soap shoes that are maybe red and white. Although if you can get a soap shoe onto a hedgehog, I'll be impressed.
That's not a challenge at Crosswise.
Yeah, no, please don't do that.
But so for Mega Drive, and we are going to call it Mega Drive because we are both British, and that is the correct name for it, and it was the Japanese name as well. So
you're going to get a load of comments that are not going to be happy with you.
I know. Look, you do know this episode is gonna. Look, to be honest with you, podcast, we don't get much feedback as a podcast. So if we start getting like hate mail because of what we've said about a DDR or the Genesis name, I'm absolutely fine with it.
I mean, you're going to go off to some good communities there. The Sega community. we were slightly giving the Super Nintendo some shade. So we maybe got some things wrong about the Banani games. Yeah, I can see you might get a few comments on this. Hey, it's all engagement.
It's all engagement. And look, we have a fantastic email provider. We have a wonderful website provider. Come at us. Come on. Yeah.
Don't actually come at us.
No, you can come at me. Just leave Naoki alone. He's a nice guy. You know, you can
oh, thank you.
I've just realised I'm recording this with a Super Mario poster behind me. I need to change the calendar.
Not a conflict of interest there at all.
No, I mean, I've got an Atari joystick. I've got a Pokemon. My Game Gear, to be fair, my Game Gear is somewhere around here. And I do, of course, have a retro colouring book of computers behind me as well. So that kind of counts.
I do have the retro colouring book too. I also have some System 5s and 3 security cards behind me because, yeah, I am...
Because
if people thought I hadn't gone deep enough into the 573 with my video, that's only half of the story.
Wow. All right. So one thing, let's, because the hardware on my Mega Drive, I mean, games, I mean, I remember playing, obviously, Sonic. Some of my favorite games are things like, obviously, Lion King at that age. And, I'm trying to think of some of my favorite Mega Drive games off the top of my head. Didn't Cannon Fodder get a Mega Drive release? It did. No, it did.
I'm not sure. It sounds like it could have, but I don't know because it's difficult because I know that there are some games that you associate with the Super Nintendo, like Top Gear, like Top Gear 1 and 2. They were on the SNES and they were more commonly known on the SNES, but they were on the Mega Drive too.
I noticed that, yeah. For all my my stacks of shall we say maybe let's not talk about how I got them emulation games. Yeah, although to be fair, we'll come to something actually at the end of this Sega chat. But there's something I want to talk about, which is the Tower of Power. Like that term, look, what are we talking here? Because Sega they took that hardware pretty far and did a lot with it.
I mean, that's a very kind way of looking at it. And the other spectrum of the argument is that the 32X resembles a mushroom cloud of the implosion of Sega. So, you know...
Hate mail can be sent to podcast@crosswires.net.
I am not saying that the 32X is terrible. I am not saying that's what it looks like. It kind of does, but, you know, that's just comments I have heard over the years. I mean, the Tower of Power is so iconic to the point that Sega even manufactured I think it was a 1/12 scale version of the Mega Drive, Mega CD and 32X. I could be wrong about the scale, but I know they did that, and they were non-functional things. But it was just iconic, really.
And it's because so let's talk now. Are we calling this Mega CD or are we calling it Sega CD? Because again.
We will call it the Mega CD because otherwise I will repeatedly call it the Sega CD.
Mega CD is... Oh, of course, because it would have... Yes, no, yes.
It was the Sega CD because it was known as the Genesis and then the Sega CD. It's literally printed on the drive bezel as Sega CD, but they also had the company, the manufacturing, so it was the Sega CD or Sega CD squared, depending on what you want to call it.
That might be our episode title. It might be dancing around the Sega CD squared. There you go.
It's almost as bad as what was it? The CD ROM.
Oh yes, for the PC Engine. Yes. So look, the Mega CD. This came How far? This came along. I mean, this was basically in the CDs are the next big thing. They are really cool. This came along. Yeah. What was the idea? What was Sega trying to do with that Sega CD, Mega CD?
I mean, so the Mega CD, that was basically in the engineers' minds pretty much as early as the Mega Drive as it was being designed, from what I've read and as I understand. So they were always looking at how can we put CD technology onto the Mega Drive? Because, I mean, you're talking, the Mega Drive came out, I think in Japan it was 1989. So technically before our bracket here, but like, I can't remember exactly the date of CDs, but that was like late 80s, I think. So obviously everyone saw CDs, and you say to someone 650 megabytes on a disc, and you just think of all the possibilities with that. So they were thinking of making a Mega CD all the way back then. It was only about 91 or 92 that they got the Mega CD launched in Japan. And when they launched it, to be fair, it was pricey, but it was adding quite a lot to it. I mean, the Mega CD itself isn't just a CD drive that attaches to the Mega Drive. It's kind of its own console, minus a graphics processor, because you've got a secondary 68,000 CPU running, I think, about 12-ish megahertz, depending on region. And actually, I tell a lie, it does have a video processor on there, but it's also got a PCM pulse code modulation sound chip on there for not only playing the CD audio, but also you could feed it PCM samples from the disc and play them without the drive being used at all. And so it was adding quite a few different features to your Mega Drive, and games that fully utilize this got really expanded as a result. I mean, like, the best you can describe it is you just look at Sonic CD. It was using every single feature that console could add. It was using the CD. Obviously, everyone knows about CD audio, and that's become one of the big things with CD-based games is high-quality Red Book audio. But it was demonstrating you didn't need to just do that. If you go into the past levels, it actually plays PCM sound files. So it loads them in from the disc into the Mega CD's RAM, plays those using the sound chip, and then it puts the drive to sleep. So if you play in the past level for long enough, the Mega CD actually goes to sleep almost. And,
wow.
Yeah, and that's also why when Sonic CD was launched in the States, they changed the soundtrack for Sonic CD, gave it that iconic Sonic Boom intro sound effect, sound music. And then they changed up all of the rest of the audio, but they didn't change the audio files for the past levels. So all of those still are the Japanese versions. And there's such a disconnect as a result from it.
Wow.
And it goes on, like, you have like the special stages. Obviously, everyone knows the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 graphics mode for sprite rotation. The fact that it can take, I think it was arbitrary sprites and scale them, rotate them, whatever. Basically, pseudo 3D. And that was one of the things that the Mega CD added, and Sonic CD took full advantage of it. So that iconic spaceship stage is all being drawn by the Mega CD.
Wow. And look, they tried FMV on this thing as well, didn't we? There are some FMV. Yeah. And now, to be clear, folks, we are not talking, well, I was going to say not talking 720p, we definitely are. But this was not like Wing Commander 3 level of FMV, was it? This was...
Yeah, so the one thing that the Mega CD couldn't address, and I say couldn't, it physically wasn't capable of, it wasn't capable of... I don't think it was capable of decoding like FMV, like that was encoded in a, like, it wasn't MPEG, put it that way. It had a limited color palette. I think the color palette of the Mega CD, the Mega Drive, it's not confusing at all, was about 64 colors. That means you can only have 64 colors on screen at any time. And now I think there are tricks around there where you use interrupts in specific ways to get more colors, but in general, you couldn't have more than 64 colors on screen. And the Mega CD couldn't do anything about this. So your FMV not only was limited to a small window, and I think this is something like, you're talking like maybe like 180 by 120 video. Don't quote me on the resolution, but something really tiny. And you only had up to 64 colors. So again, Sonic CD tried its best by using Japanese anime-styled video for its attract sequence. But games like Night Trap, they look terrible.
It didn't do itself any favors. Now, but I think about, that I have a resounding, because of course this will play CD audio, which, you at the time was, for teenagers, that would have been a big thing. In the same way that the PlayStation 2 was possibly one of the most common DVD players, and I think the PlayStation itself was possibly one of the most common CD audio players, there would have been a part where, someone who had a Sega, I'm saying the wrong thing, Mega CD part of their stack, they'd be able to play like CD audio. Now, I remember my cousin, if my uncle's listening, by the way, it's, which cousin I'm talking about, he had a Mega Drive. Now, he had the Mega Drive 2 and the Mega CD 2, which were this like weird, where you got almost like a tray that you had to put them both into. Very different to the original. Well, maybe we can talk about that. But I remember me saying to him, "Oh, this is cool. You've got a CD player." And my grandma saying, "No. He can't touch that because he's too young." I didn't quite understand what she meant by that. Like this conception that CDs were like this adult thing.
Yeah, let's be honest. I think again, Night Trap, it kind of was in some aspects. Yeah, I see. Like CD was something special, like because like looking at it practically, it was a cheap way of like getting stuff out. I mean, compared to like for like audio CDs, compared to cassette tapes, it was simple. Shove plastic into a pressing machine, press it, and then move on to the next one. Keep on doing that. You could make hundreds and hundreds in a day. Well, hundreds in a day. You know what I mean? Like,
no, it was a very, very interesting. I mean, CD was, I grew up, I had a tape deck. That was my music. But then I did get a CD, and it was game changing. It's just Red Book audio in games. I know the Mega CD had. See, I'm doing it. The Mega CD had its problems. It was expensive. And do you think, would people consider the Mega CD a failure?
I mean, it's all relative. Like, in the terms of a console, first of all, console add-ons and upgrades, and they never do well. And game developers are wary to support them because they want to target the console, the system that has the most appeal. Commodore 64 owners will know all about this. You want to target the most amount of people for your game. So when you were developing for the Mega CD, there was an added cost because you got to put stuff on that disc. So if you're going to fill it with background audio, now you need to actually, you would have already had your composers, but now you've got to tell your composers, you're not programming for the FM chip and the PSG and PCM. By the time you had the Mega CD to Mega Drive, you've got at least 3 different audio chips in there. You're not programming for any of those. We want CD quality audio, and so they have to put more time and energy into making that sound good.
Right.
And if you don't put CD audio on there, you're going to put video on there. I mean, you've got to use that disc up. So a lot of these FMV games, and it's almost like they were struggling to think of ways to make a game that utilized the CD to justify the sort of the costs behind it, like to justify the cost of purchasing the Mega CD to begin with.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on it. Wasn't there I remember even going back as far as the Spectrum, game developers would code for the lowest memory variant of the Speccy, not necessarily for the 48K. They'd program for the 16K. Because that would be the base level.
Exactly. And making a cartridge is expensive and there's lead times. There is a lot of issues with that. They are very robust and reliable, but they're expensive. This is all stuff that Nintendo should have learned later on, but they didn't. But it's kind of a double-edged sword. Now you've got this cheap media, you've got to make an impression with it. Otherwise, people are going to go, well, why did I buy this $250 expansion to my $250 console? It doesn't. The maths doesn't add up.
No, and it's very interesting. And that brings me on to, speaking of add-ons for 32X, or now That goes by other names as well, doesn't it? Was it the...
It was, so it's not as confusing. It was always known as the 32X in different regions, but I think it was the 32X in Japan, the Mega 32X in Europe, and the Sega 32X in Japan, in North America. The Americas.
Right.
I think I'm wrong, but I think it goes something like that.
Okay, that makes sense. So just added on names rather than a whole. So it was always the 32X. It just had different bits on the front of it.
Yeah. And as a snide comment, you could also say that the 32X pretty much represents the amount of games that you could buy for the system. It's not true, but it may as well be.
Yeah, get a 32X for 32 games. No,
you may as well add for like $59.99 onto the end of that, because by the end of the system's lifetime, that's effectively what it was. It's like go into game, and it was like there for like, well, I say game, but go into your local game shop,
Electronics Boutique, yeah,
maybe, and you buy it for like $19.99.
Here, sir, please take this 32X. We beg of you, take this 32X.
We need the shop space.
Oh, we are going to get roasted, aren't we, by the 32X fans for this one? All right.
I'm sorry, but
Cool.
Don't get me wrong. Some of there are some gems on the 32X. There are some good games. I must admit, I haven't got a plethora of experience. I've never had a 32X. I have played on one. One of my good friends has one. He's a massive Sega nut. Like, he has as many things Sonic as you can think he has. He has big statues as well of like the characters, but I think he has the entire EU collection. Like, he has an entire EU library of 32X games, which ironically I think takes up just one shelf, but
all right. I mean, the standout one for me, it has to be the Star Wars 32X arcade port.
Yeah, I mean, there are some good games. Admittedly, it doesn't sound like when you take a modern perspective and you look at it in the past, like Virtua Racing Deluxe, which was a 32X version. Now, the Mega Drive already had Virtua Racing, and it was the only example of Sega basically trying to be Nintendo and catch up by using a Super FX-like chip, a digital signal processor, DSP, that gets added into the cartridge to generate some of the polygons that you use in the games. But, you play the Mega Drive version, you play the 32X version, and the 32X version just has so much better visuals, because it can do rudimentary 3D quite well, to be fair. So it was like, there are some good examples, like I said. So there's Virtua Racing Deluxe. I think it was Virtua Fighter, if I'm not mistaken, was on there as well. Which, let's be honest, going from a Model 1 arcade board, which is way more powerful than the Mega Drive 32X was, and you're running that game on that system, that's pretty impressive, to be fair.
To take it to home consoles. I think, Alex from Arcade Archive, who we keep referencing, he said for him, he got to the 16-bit era and stopped having that same interest in the arcade. Now, fair enough, because home consoles were doing a better. Well, he thought they were doing a better or just as good job. But 32X, it was basically, was it actually 32-bit? Because I know it had additional processors.
It was 32-bit. It's actually dual CPU. I mean, I think it was running two Hitachi SH1s, so it was legitimately 32-bit. And when the 32X was activated, it took over the entire console. It was the top of everything. And it had its own video processor. It actually took the video out of the Mega Drive, took it into itself, and then spat out its own video just so that it could get over the color limitation of 64 colors. So it's using the Mega Drive for audio and sound and input, effectively. I think you can still use the 68K, but I mean, why would you? You've got two SH1s. I think it might use the VDPs for some background layers. In fact, I'm pretty much certain, like in Virtua Fighter, it does exactly that. And then everything else, like the 3D graphics, is all done by the 32X. And then you add in the Mega CD, and then you're like, now you're using the CD drive to add to.
Yeah, it gets
messy.
It does, and then of course you've got, because we want to talk about Sega's actual first 32-bit console, but then you have like the whole, like I think the joke is you take, what is it, Sega CD, the Mega Drive Mark 1, 32X, and then Sonic and Knuckles. Is it Sonic? Wait, hang on, let me get this right. Which is it? Sonic and Knuckles that then.
Yeah, Sonic and Knuckles, and then like, in fact, I think you can go a step further because there are like, I think you can put a Game Genie on, and then a couple of other. I think there's one or two others that you could put on them, and then you get Sonic and Knuckles, and then you get the Master System 2 converter, and then you put the Master System game on top of that.
That can't have been state. I would love to see. I'd love to see a pic. In fact, Neil, if you're listening, I bet you've got all this hardware at the cave. I will buy you a beer if you put that together.
There is a image that has floated around since the early 2000s, since the dawn of the internet, and it is of the true Mega Drive tower of instability.
Because of course, look, these like the 32X and the Sega CD, they had to have their own power bricks.
Yeah, that's the thing we didn't even mention, is the fact that you were adding these things, and your power strip was getting longer and longer. And remember, these plugs, they're not just your regular typical. In the UK, it would be 3-pin BS standard plug. It wasn't one of those. It was a brick on a plug, and the bricks was big enough that they would actually cover up the sockets next to it. So you would end up having to have a 6-gang socket to have 3 consoles on. It was so ridiculous that Sega, after the 32X was launched, and I can't believe they actually did this, after the 32X was launched, they made their own power strip with the plugs separated just enough that you could put in all 3 power supplies and plug that into the wall.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So you could buy a Sega branded power strip. I love that so much.
It's almost as ludicrous as the Xbox Series X fridge that Microsoft launched.
Yes. Well, that did serve a useful purpose. You could keep your...
So did the Sega Power Strip. It powered your consoles.
I just want to know how many house fires started from dads trying to wire up some contraption. Like,
oh, I can just imagine, like, the freeway plug adapters that you plug into the thing, and you just have big old blocky things that they're so heavy it's starting to pull the plug out of the wall.
Never mind the plug out of the wall. It's like all of a sudden your house has subsidence.
You turn on your tower of power, and then just the entire lights of the neighborhood dim.
Oh, Jimmy's playing Sega again.
Mom, I can't play my Super Nintendo. Jimmy's playing on his tower of power.
There you go, Sega. Here, Jimmy, can you turn it off? I want to make a cup of tea.
The thing is, like, it's kind of ludicrous. Like, if you could not do something like that nowadays, not only just because of, we have way more efficient CPUs and stuff like that. We have switched mode power supplies, which are way more efficient, and we don't need, your laptop charger will have a big brick and it will get warm. But these older ones, these linear power supplies, had big chunking transformers inside of them that got warm, like pretty warm.
Very
you had
warm.
The linear power supplies in the consoles themselves, which got pretty warm as well. You were wasting so much power on these things as well.
Well, I mean, maybe that's a solution to the cost of living crisis. Issue every home with a Sega power to tower of power as a heating source. Entertain the people, and heat them at the same time.
It's one of my favorite mods to do to a Sega CD and a Mega CD. I've done this several times now. Not only do they have this whole ridiculous power situation, but they have the dreaded center negative of power supplies as well, and they don't need them. So every single console I put in a bridge rectifier, which, for those who don't know, it's basically an AC to DC converter. And the only reason I do that is so that you can use either center negative or center positive. It doesn't matter. These diodes will put the voltage in the right order that it's supposed to be to power the console. Because I've bought 2 Mega CDs now, and both of them have had their power boards. They've got craters in them because people plug in 12-volt power supplies that have center positive, and I want to know what happens when they do that. There must be a heck of a pop, because like I took out the board, and there's where there is supposed to be a power filter, there is just a literal crater, a burnt crater. And the way I fix them is just by putting on these bridge rectifiers and then attaching them into the thing, and they've always worked afterwards.
I mean, here's a random question for you before we move on to the Saturn. Are there mods these days that will allow you to power these devices via USB-C?
Oh, that's a good question. There must be. I mean, you need a minimum of about a minimum voltage of about, if you're using the stock internal hardware, you would want about 7.5 volts. I think USB-C, if you get a power delivery, like a receptacle that can take power delivery, it can request 9 volts from USB-C, at which point then it could potentially power at least a Mega Drive, maybe a Mega CD or something if you're being particularly risky. I think the better thing is to just take out the linear power supplies on the insides, the 7805s, and just wire the USB 5-volt straight to the motherboard directly and then power it that way.
Okay, so replace the actual... And I guess...
it'd
yeah,
be far more efficient.
And I guess that also means, there's no reason you would ever want to do this because there's no networking functionality on these machines, but 802.11af PoE? I mean, like...
Actually, that's not a bad idea. I mean, thinking about it, it'd be annoying. It's annoying, like, stuff like it's going to use it, like the PlayStation 2 or the Xbox is when Ethernet really was kicking off with consoles. It's kind of annoying that they don't, like, they use... okay, the Slim PS2 is an exception that has an external jack. But it's a shame that the Xbox, the OG Xbox, doesn't have a way of powering it that isn't AC power.
Yeah, because that's got its own built-in power supply. Oh, yeah.
Because then you could have actually powered it over 802.11. No, that's Wi-Fi 8. What did you say? 802.
It is 802.11 AF is.
Is it?
It's not 11.8. No, it is.
Yeah, it is. I should know this. I literally just did this Jack PC, and it's 802.11 AF. You're right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. The other reason I mention it is because it's something we talked about with Reese, about like Reese's off-grid solution. And I talked a little bit about PoE. So, by the way, for those of you who don't know what the heck we're talking about, power over Ethernet, the ability to power Ethernet devices and actually even non-Ethernet devices. I've got my Philips Hue bridge powered by PoE and my network TV tuner. I just bought a PoE splitter. So actually, that might still work. You'd have to be very careful with it. We're going down a complete rabbit hole.
I can see the cogs turning in your head, and after this is done, you're going to start working on this new project.
Oh, I'm not. No, don't let me. This is one thing. This is why I have guests like Naoki on my show, because with my eyesight, I do not touch electronics. I know it would end in disaster. I leave that to my dad. My dad is my electrical engineer. All right, the Saturn, because this was Sega's true 32-bit console. I say, well, it was, wasn't it? I mean, I'm not getting this wrong.
Yeah, it is. So, the irony is, it's kind of like Sega looked at their much-loved child that they've been adding and slowly killing because of them adding on the add-ons. And they looked at it and goes, yes, I want that all. And then they designed the Saturn in exactly the same way, because the Saturn is just a mixture of everything. I mean, and I'm not even kidding. I mean, whatever the Mega Drive had, it's probably in the Saturn somewhere, because the architecture of the Sega Saturn is ridiculous, and got more so when Sony announced the PlayStation. So to put it into perspective, most like the Sony PlayStation, when it launched with has a single MIPS I think it's MIPS free CPU. It has its own custom graphics controller, and those two are very tightly integrated. They may as well be a system on a chip, but they're just in 2 chips. And then it has the SPU, the audio processor, which is kind of an evolution of the sound chip that was in the Super Nintendo. And then it has a CD drive, and that's it. That's your console, and it does it really well.
Mm.
And then you've got Sega, on the other hand, and I can see you smiling. You know what's coming.
Yeah.
They have not 1, but 2 main CPUs. They've got 2 SH2 CPUs using a master and slave configuration. Then they have 2 graphics chips, one called VDP1, one called VDP2. I'm sure you're very surprised to hear that. They also have a DSP chip. They also have a 68K CPU. They also then have a SH1 CPU that just does the CD drive. They also have their sound chip is a mixture of. It's basically, to be fair, the sound chip is probably the most sane part of it. It was designed by Yamaha, and it's basically, you get Yamaha, it basically says you got 32 channels of stereo audio up to 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz, and you can either do PCMs, samples, you can do FM and a few other things, and I think it's something that's like I could be wrong, I think it's a 4 or 6 stage FM synth. So it's a good, impressive sound chip that got relegated to playing CD audio, but yeah, just like, what was Sega thinking?
Like, okay, and can you explain something else to me? Because it was CD based,
Yeah,
but it had a cartridge slot. What the heck was that for?
So not what you think.
Okay.
It wasn't like they were hedging their bets. It was CD. You would load your software via CD. The cartridge port was designed, it even says on the actual door, it's an expansion pack. So this was for things like RAM carts or even ROM carts. So if you wanted stuff to be loaded, like if you didn't want stuff like constantly use assets to always be loading from CD, you might sell a game with a ROM cart, so it had instant access to that data. They did a modem with that cartridge port. Both Sega had their own system, and I think Expand in the States. So there's quite a few things that you could do with it. And it's not true. I want to say this is not true, but I had an interesting discussion with my stepdad. We were talking about the Sega Saturn a few years ago, and he said he remembered plugging in a Mega Drive game and playing it on his Saturn. And I thought that makes sense. It has enough power to do that. Like it's got a Yamaha chip that's capable of doing FM synth and possibly also PSG. It's got a 68K CPU in there, and it's got more than enough power to do. And I think the VDP2, is it VDP2 that does the 2D functions? I can't remember, but I think it's an evolved form of the VDP that was found in the Mega Drive. So in theory, it has all the specs and capabilities of running Mega Drive games, but it doesn't. Because, well, first of all, the cartridge port itself is completely different. There's no similarities in the dimensions or in the interface or in the... It's completely different. So I don't know where he got that impression from, but what I think it's because he was playing Sonic Jam, which has all of the Mega Drive games on it, but I'm not saying they're emulated. They were native ports to the Saturn.
Right. So these are all, and just to be clear, we mean all the Sonic Mega Drive games, not the entire...
No, it was just, I can't remember off the top. I think it was Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles, and maybe a handful of others. And fun factoid about that was the fact that if you go into the Sonic World section of Sonic Jam and you're roaming around, everyone knows that that's probably one of the first iterations of 3D Sonic on a console. I think it was one of the first. I can't remember if it was the first, but apparently that demo was the actual prototype version of Sonic Adventure that was released on the Dreamcast. Like, they began making it for the Saturn because Sega of America was struggling to make Sonic Extreme, Sega of Japan were doing their own thing. And if you read into the stories, apparently there's quite a bit of rivalry going on between the two companies. But when they eventually realized that, the Saturn missed the mark by a small step, they moved all of their developments to the Dreamcast. And rather than just ditching all of the code that they've made up to that point, they actually used it and compiled it into what is now apparently in Sonic Jam. So I love that story. I hope that is completely true, and it's not just made up by some. But because that'd be such a fun world into seeing how classic Sonic kind of died, but then we got modern Sonic from Sonic Adventure onwards.
Very interesting. Look, I only played on this thing a few times. Again, I know my uncle had a Saturn. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, am I wrong? There are different colours. Didn't the Japanese have a white Saturn?
Yeah, the Japanese got a load of different variations. So in the States and in the UK, we had the Model 1 and we had the Model 2. Very few differences between them, not worth mentioning really. But in Japan, where the Saturn did, to be fair, it did a lot better than it did in the West. They had loads of different versions, and not just versions though. Not just color versions. We also mean like different versions. There was a Saturn that you could that had an integrated GPS receiver that was designed to be run in a car.
What?
And if you're, and as a plug to our friendly Neil, he actually did a video on the Navi Saturn.
That thing, yes,
yeah. But you had people like Victor, which over in the West we call JVC.
Mm-hmm.
But in Japan are known as the Japanese Victor Corporation, or just Victor. They were making Saturns. Samsung were making Saturns. Hitachi were making Saturns, I believe. Yeah, because of a high Saturn. And I mean, again, if anyone's interested in the fact that Sega were nuts, like Nintendo, they wouldn't dream of letting someone else make their own versions of their consoles. Well, if you don't include Mattel during the NES days, but Nintendo got very frustrated with them very fast. But in Japan, Sega, like, you could get so many variations of both the Mega Drive or the Saturn. It was crazy.
That's mad. I mean, I was going to say, Nintendo, because there's those very rare. There's the Panasonic Q, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a Panasonic Q,
which is a GameCube in like a carrier. Well, like a DVD. I don't know how you describe that.
I think the best way of describing it is a silver mid-2000s CD player, because it really you if you imagine that look of like an IKEA furniture, and then you've got your silver with a mirror front CD player, and bookshelf speakers off to the side, but in fact it's actually a DVD player and a GameCube.
Yeah, I remember there's a very rare like the hotel game Nintendo 64s and stuff like that, but I'm going to guess they were the exception. Like, Nintendo are very tight about their hardware and about their software. Like
the Hotel 64s, I think, if I'm not, I'm getting confused with the Saturn there. Sorry. Yeah, no, there are like, even with the Seta, there's a Seta Corporation. They actually made the Alex 64, which is the arcade version of the Nintendo 64.
Okay.
But yeah, you can see that Nintendo had their hand in it because they put their name on that board. So if they put their name on it, you know that they had their hands involved in it in some way.
Whereas what we're saying with the Saturn is that, like, the likes of Samsung and Hitachi were actually making boards and making
Yeah, I mean, we've seen like the portable versions of like the Mega Drive, in the fact of like you had like the Sega Nomad, but then obviously they had that. But you had things like the JVC XI in Japan, which was a combo Mega Drive and Sega CD in one unit with an actual motorized, it's not a tray loader, it's a top loader CD drive, but the actual door is motorized and it's real fancy. They were nuts with amount of derivatives and versions, and they're all the same basic design. It's not like the Navi Saturn aside, it's not like they are inherently different specifications. They all are the same. It's just different brands who make them.
But I mean, then again, this is the same Sega who were allowed Amstrad to make the Mega PC.
True.
And the laser active? Again, this is all Neil-induced knowledge, and I don't know. Was it the laser active that you could put Sega CD or Mega Drive the MDLD or something like that? This is...
Yeah, so that is a very rare format. But yes, Mega LD was a thing. Laserdisc. Forget your CDs. Laserdisc. A big 12-inch disc that span, was it 2,500 RPM or something like that? It's something ridiculously fast. I mean, and these are not like discs. I actually repaired a Pioneer LD unit. I think it was just the laser was bust on it. But I had the cover off and I had to test that the mechanism was all working. So I put the disc in and it spun up. And as it's spinning up, I know it's getting faster and faster. And this is it's like a 1, 2, 3 kind of count up. I'm thinking to myself, God, I hope that disc doesn't come out. Because if that comes out, I'm worried of decapitation.
Oh wow! I mean, look, my school had a laserdisc player in my English lab, and we only ever used it for Shakespeare. Yeah, Sega, and look, this is the same company. I think you've summed it up. They're mad. This is the same company that made a Master System adapter for the Game Gear.
Well, that's because the Game Gear is a Master System.
Yes, I mean, not to forget the TV tuner.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But mind you, PC Engine had a TV tuner too for the GT, and you can get a TV tuner for the GBA.
You can. You're right.
So,
you can.
I mean, to be fair, I think TV tuners are just par for the course for portable stuff.
But yes. But it's very. Oh, I love this era of random console add-ons. We could do a whole. In fact, at some point, there's 2 episodes I want to do about handheld PDAs and early smartphones. I meant a whole thing on handheld consoles like the Game Boy, like the Game Gear. We'll need to make it a long episode if we're going to talk Atari Lynx.
Yeah. I get that one.
Yeah. To be fair, actually, I think the Steam Deck is actually a bit bigger than the Lynx. In fact, yes, it is.
How many Amstrad CPCs long is it?
What, the Steam Deck? Oh, I don't think. Yeah. I don't think it's quite a. I don't think it's quite a CPC.
0.8 CPC.
So there we go. New measurement term.
You know what? Next time I do a video, I'm gonna have to use that as a measuring term. Yes. All right. Yeah. Look, here's the thing. I was going to do Desert Island Games, but I'm also aware of time, so I'm gonna. Let's wrap this up with. We didn't even talk about Dreamcast, and that was intentional. We were talking about 2 specific eras of Sega. The Dreamcast to me, is a sad story. It could have been so much more. Oh, and I had a Dreamcast for a while, and you mentioned in one of your recent videos about the Jack PC Windows CE. Well, look, that thing was running. Not all of it, but some games had embedded copies of Windows CE. The Dreamcast is a whole thing by itself, and it was sad. I was sad to see Sega get out of the game, but today, I think the ultimate, this is not the same Sega anymore, is that I've got the Nintendo Switch online expansion pack, and one of the things you get with that is Mega Drive games on a Nintendo console. Sounds like sacrilege now you say it, doesn't it?
It really does, doesn't it? And I mean, do you think so? If we had that magic bullet, if it was like a what if Sega was still in a console game today?
Oh God, this is just people saying, "Oh, Dreamcast 2 confirmed." The inherent thing is with Sega, there was nothing. They were on a downward path, like a path that was just spiraling into chaos. I don't think there was anything that they could have done. The only thing they could have done to steer their course right was to be a sensible company about things and, be a bit forward thinking. What made them great was the fact that they would do these crazy things, that they would go really aggressively at Nintendo. But ultimately, we talk about Nintendo. You're talking about Nintendo Switch now, and Sega is just a distant, it's not a distant memory, but you don't hear about Sega so much anymore. Whereas you hear about them as a publisher, but Nintendo is so well known with Sony and Microsoft. And if Sega during the 90s didn't play around, in my opinion, if they didn't play around, if maybe, the Mega CD, that should have come out. It might have always been a failure, but the 32X was just such a stupid. They should have never made that. That console killed the people that were on the Mega Drive or the people that were waiting for the Saturn. It was just like a slap to the face. Why would you buy it?
Yeah.
And then they came up with a Saturn and they butchered it right from day one. And why? Sony launched the PlayStation and Sega were like, "Oh, we will trounce these people. We will crush them by adding a secondary processor." The thing is, outside of arcade development, people like programmers don't want to deal with that. The Saturn was already a pain to program for. And then you add in the secondary CPU. Most games didn't actually use it. They would basically, the program that would get uploaded to this secondary CPU, all it did was just tick it over. At which point, you may as well not have it.
Yeah.
And the DSP, for example, that's in the Saturn, you could do great things with it. You can do wonderful things with it. But ultimately, it was not easy to utilize. You had to really think about how you wanted to use it. I can't remember his name off the top of my mind, but the developer behind Traveler's Tales, who made games like Sonic R for the Saturn, he said you could do up to 6 operations per cycle on the DSP, and if you could utilize it right, the DSP would do things fast, and that was the way he was able to get the levels to load into the distance in Sonic R. But you needed that really experienced development. You needed to be an experienced developer to fully utilize it. And this is something that Sony learned when they launched the PlayStation 3. Developers don't care about necessarily the power because they've got requirements. They have deadlines to meet. They need a simple, easy to understand architecture that just works. So really, for Sega to be a console maker in today's market, they would have had to scrap the 32X before it was even a thought. They would have had to change the Saturn so maybe keep the DSP, maybe don't, but single CPU. And then they shouldn't have launched the Saturn 6 months earlier than it's supposed to. Let it launch when it was supposed to launch. Don't piss off the people who are going to sell your console. Don't piss off the developers. That's what they should have done. The Dreamcast, as good, Sega learned when they made a Dreamcast, but it wasn't going to save them. Nothing after the 90s. I don't think anything was going to save them.
No, it was a sad because GD-ROM.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, at least it was trying to do its own thing. I mean, Nintendo technically has the Nintendo optical disc. It's effectively DVD based, but
Oh, you mean the GameCube disc, right?
Well, GameCube and Wii disc, they're basically the same thing, just different size. But yeah, that kind of thing. But
yes,
yeah, Sega was already on. They were on. Walking. It wasn't working on eggshells, but they're on a very, very thin ice. And then Sony utterly obliterated them because, and I'll use this quote from Jack Tramiel, "Business is war," and Sony knew they could potentially kill it. Well, I don't think they knew they'd kill off Sega, but I think they knew that if they put the DVD player and got it out earlier and overstated its specifications, they were going to trounce the Dreamcast, and that's what they did. And the Dreamcast just became like the swan song. It was a bittersweet end to, you know, what was a lot of people's childhoods, including mine.
So just remind me, by the way, the Dreamcast, what generation does that fits into a PS2 generation, right? Okay.
It launched 99, I think, early 2000s, but it was practically the same time as the PS2.
And because the thing that's always made, it's been my personal theory, and I'm sure it's wrong, is that I always got Dreamcast vibes from the OG Xbox.
Yes, and I bet that's because Sega and Microsoft did work together for quite a while afterwards. And it's not surprising because Microsoft knew all the software. They didn't necessarily know the hardware. Although they obviously, Microsoft cheated. They just put in a Pentium 3 PC because it was what they knew and how they could adapt it easily. So, but yeah, no, there was, I think there was a rumor about how the Xbox was the Dreamcast 2 of its day kind of thing.
I mean, that's certainly I mean, little things like those 4 controller ports and other little bits. But
like
yes.
the two memory card sockets in the controller.
Yes, definitely. I somewhere still have my Dreamcast VMU.
Yeah, I do too, and annoyingly, it's got all my child data on it, and I can't find my disc.
Oh no! Look, we could spend another hour, honestly, talking about this, but I'm very much aware that I've got work at 7 a.m. tomorrow. I love my new shift pattern. I love this new job, and I love everything about it. I love working Sunday through Thursday because it means I got Friday and Saturday off. But 7 a.m. No, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. But Naoki, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. This has honestly been like, I was really looking forward to this because I knew that you were going to have some great insights. This has been so much fun, and we'll absolutely have to have you back on the show to talk more. I'm sure there's more nerdy retro stuff. We can sit in a corner and bad joke.
Yeah,
right.
no, seriously, thank you. It's incredibly kind words, and yeah, no, I'd love to be back on. I think like you say, this is stuff that I am really passionate about, and I could, as Jack would say, I can talk your ear off about it. So
I'm just thinking of an episode of you two together. It'd be like a 6-hour recording.
I mean,
we need to do Crosswires live, as in not our Twitch stream. We need to do. We need to do a live recording sometime, like a retro live.
That would be interesting to do. But yeah, no, absolutely. It's been great to be on, and been fantastic. Thank you very much for having me.
My absolute pleasure. So, Naoki, where can people find your content if they want to go and check out more of your retro shenanigans?
For the most part, you can find it on YouTube if you search for Naoki's Retro Corner or Naoki SRC. On Twitter, I am known as, Naoki's SRC on there. Pretty much type in Naoki, which is Naoki SRC, and if I'm on that platform, I should pop up.
Awesome. And of course, you're active in it still hasn't changed back, I've just looked.
Is it not changed back? Oh, Neil's going to be punished for that.
Oh, absolutely. But come and check out the RMC Discord as well. And Neil, look, I think I certainly owe my retro passion and my retro content ideas to Neil and some to yourself as well. But yeah, come and join my Discord. It's such a great community. Apart from the occasional rib from Neil or, just randomness. But yeah, come and join my community. Oh yeah, come and join ours. We've got a Discord. crosswise.net/Discord. We are going to, try and do stuff and come and check out our live streams. But Naoki, thank you so much for your time. We will roll the outro. Thanks for listening to this episode of Crosswires. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So please drop us a note over to podcast@crosswires.net.
You can also drop us a comment on the post, or if you're a GoodPod user, why not start a discussion there too?
You can also join our new Discord server at crosswires.net/Discord. We've got forum channels for each episode, and we'd love you to join the discussion there.
You can also follow us on Mastodon at Crosswires @mastodon.social.
And of course, you can find the show in all the good podcast apps. And all the really bad ones, too.
More of our content, head on over to crosswires.net/YouTube for all our videos, and keep an eye on our Twitch channel at crosswires.net/live for our upcoming streams.
If you like what you heard, please do drop a review in your podcast directory of choice. It really does help spread the word about the show.
And of course, if you can spare even the smallest amount of financial support, we'd be incredibly grateful. You can support us at ko-fi.com/crosswires. That is ko-fi.com/crosswires.
Until next time, thanks for listening.